This week on the Walk On podcast, you've mentioned your team a couple times. You talked about giving space to your successor. How do you prepare a team for new leadership and direction? How do you set them up for success?
I'm trying to make sure that systems are in place and supporting them in this transition. Their future success is the best reflection on my career. So any tools I can give them, any comfort I can give them, knowing that I built that core enthusiasm, they'll adapt to just a different way of someone leading.
Hello and welcome to the Walk On podcast. I should probably say at the beginning, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, so my voice will probably come and go today, but I'm thrilled with our guest. And before we do that, just welcoming everybody into the podcast. If you're new here, I started a journey about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, to really figure out what moved me, what I was passionate about as I look at the rest of my career, and realized one of the things I love doing is talking to people. And so podcasting became a natural. And so the goal of the podcast is really to listen to people's journeys, how they found their purpose, their passion. And so I'm going to pivot today and do much less talking, but I'm thrilled to welcome Valerie Knoblauch onto the show. Val is the long-term leader of Visit Finger Lakes, Ontario County's tourism agency. She's really been on the cutting edge of promoting the Finger Lakes region and tourism work for a number of years. And I'm sad to say she is retiring soon. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. But Val, welcome onto the show. And please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Michael. And hopefully that cold will get past you here. So
thank you.
Yeah, it's been an interesting run, that's for sure. At the end of May, I'll be finishing up a 40-year career at Finger Lakes Visitors Connection, where I've been the executive director or president since the beginning when the county formed our agency. It started out as a 6-month project that they wanted to improve the tourism industry in Ontario County for the purposes of economic development. And they took a risk on me and I took a risk on them. And here we are 40 years later and still promoting tourism, and everything changes every day. Prior to that, my original education was in English education. I was going to be a teacher and I did that for a year. And while I was teaching and before I was teaching, my real initial job in tourism was as a tour guide at Gold Seal Vineyards. And that got me out with a similar passion to yours and talking to people and presenting the product and seeing how much fun everybody had with the product. And so I was doing that during high school and then through college. It was my summer job. And then when I decided not to continue teaching, my boss at the winery offered me a public relations management job there, and it just sailed from there. I was there about 7 years, loved my job, and then there were some mergers going on, and I decided to get a job closer to home, and this was the one that popped up for me.
That's fantastic. At what point do you realize, tourism is the thing that I love? And I don't know if you could foresee 40 years at the same place, but what was that like when you sort of clicked into, I really am passionate about this work?
Well, I think actually I was very lucky that in high school, junior year in high school, our social studies teacher offered a chance for Little Prattsburgh, a community of so small and only 36 kids in my class. And she offered to take us on a foreign exchange trip, not exchange trip, but to go visit. So I was a junior in a high school and one of 5 kids in my family, but my parents thought it would be a great opportunity. So they let me go along with that trip. And the next year she offered one that was to Germany. The next year was to England. And so that's probably my first taste of, gosh, I really like this travel stuff. I like seeing the different cultures. I like meeting the people. And so that was that side of it. And then presenting something through the winery. So it's just like this evolving thing that was of interest to me. And then I found myself eventually not too far into like, why do people come? I think that's the base. Like, what motivates people to come? And how can I take what I know in the area I know and translate that into their motivations?
Interesting. That's a really interesting calculation that you're trying to do there. Figure out here's the wonderful things we have. How does it align with people's motivation and interests?
Right. And contemporary, and that changed over time. So you talk about longevity, the why they came continually changes because it's societal changes. And tourism to me is very much a reflection of society and the values. Today, it's a lot about environmental tourism. It's about voluntourism, as we call it. And that's a lot different than the original, which was just to travel, to go somewhere different. And so it just continues to mutate, and I find it interesting. And then once you're in this industry, you never look at travel the same way again. You walk in and you're all about the experience in a different kind of way. You're evaluating the hospitality that you receive. You're looking at the unique features. You're looking at the signage. So it's like you can never be the same kind of tourist after a while, but it all aids in helping inform the best practices to get people to come, stay, and enjoy.
So, vacation is about unplugging, right? It's about recharging. So, there you are evaluating, service. How do you turn that off when you're traveling?
Gosh, I don't think you really do. I have to be honest. I think I unplug it by looking for different experiences that I know that I can't get at home. I get so involved in them and learning new things, because if I would travel with different people, then there are different interests that they bring to it. So if you can engage yourself in their interest as well, you learn more. I have some art friends that would always want to go to the different art museums. And at first, that wasn't really in my repertoire. But once I got there with them, all of a sudden, and now even if I'm not with them, I'm finding myself in an art museum. I was at the Chihuly exhibit down in Florida about a month ago, and just look at it differently because I've seen it through somebody else's eyes. So I think that's the way I can unplug, is like seeing it those different ways.
That's that's really fascinating. So before we get too far along, and you do such an amazing job that there certainly aren't any of our listeners who don't know the Finger Lakes, but just in case, why don't you give a little overview of what the Finger Lakes is?
Well, the Finger Lakes, my 90-second elevator speech would be that we're in upstate New York, upstate Western New York. So geographically between Lake Ontario, the Pennsylvania border, and Syracuse and Rochester, there are 11 lakes, and the 11 lakes by lore are the handprints of the Great Spirit who blessed this land. And leading to the blessings, we are everything from a tremendous history background for this country, not compared to Europe, but for this country, because we were the mother of counties, and also what we've retained in terms of our outdoors amenities. The basis of the lakes is our entertainment. And now growing from both of those things are certainly the wine, craft beverage, and culinary assets that we have become renowned for as well.
Yeah, and what how has the region evolved, during your time here?
Well, it's interesting when I started, and I would say I was from the Finger Lakes of New York, pretend I was at a motor coach show, or I was out at, I remember one time I was in New York City at a diner and having something to eat and talking to the waitress, and she said, "Oh, where are you from?" I said, "Oh, I'm from the Finger Lakes of New York." She goes, "Oh, I know that." And I go, "Oh, you do? That's great." And she goes, "Yeah, I get to go to the OTB parlor and the races. I bet on them." So thankfully, our image, our brand has evolved since then, and more people know us for what we are. And it's changed extensively over the years.
Yeah, and you referenced the wine industry, which we are winning global awards for the quality of wine, but there's really year-round activity besides just culinary and the wonderful wine and beer and spirits and beverages that are here.
Yeah, I think as we look forward, people say, what are you going to do in retirement? And my husband and I have chosen this is our retirement home because we love the seasonality of it, and we love all those other things that I've been talking about. Besides that, it's a great place to grow a family and run a business. So the seasonality is known. Of course, we're lucky because we have Bristol Mountain right in our area and the ski areas. We're very close to Niagara Falls, Toronto, Buffalo, Syracuse, Thousand Islands. So a lot of co-op things can happen in other seasons. Bicycling can be pretty extended, cross-country skiing. And this is something we promote a lot. There's nothing like a bed and breakfast with a cozy fireplace and a glass of wine. And to your earlier point, it's just a great place to unplug in any season. There's just a different pace here.
Yeah, grew up in Rochester, moved to Atlanta for 20 years, came back. I'm a rare boomerang, and I went to Hobart College, which is right in the heart of the Finger Lakes wine area. And it was just night and day. We moved back in 2016, and it was a different place entirely. And I still have this little nagging voice in the back of my head. I know how extraordinary it is. I know how we're getting recognized nationally. But I had this is it really kind of, in the back of my head? And one of my clients is in the public relations world is a massive California wine fan. And the big test was he came up for a work trip and we had some meetings and he stayed at the lake house right on the lake in Canandaigua. And that was a thumbs up, right? That was like, wow, okay, this is pretty special. And then we tried the wine and he's now a zealot. And I think that's what's really fascinating, how much it's changed. But people, once they come and experience it, there's this sense of, oh, I'm on the know. I know what's coming next. And it's the Finger Lakes. So I don't know if you get that from people, that sense of wonder when they come here.
I do, and I'm privileged, I'll say, as part of my job that we get to host the media. And these are well-traveled people from literally all over the world. And you take them to experience the things that you just mentioned. And when you do that, you are going around with someone who is looking at everything with fresh eyes. And one time I had a media in here and we were driving around Honeoye Lake and there were the mailboxes lined up along the road there. And she said, stop. And she was from England, I think, and she was fascinated by the mailboxes and took a picture of them. And so little details like that somebody who is unaccustomed to them all the time, they open your eyes to, that is pretty cool. And then all of a sudden you're running around looking at mailboxes all over the county, and saying, maybe I have more mailboxes I could promote somewhere. But it's that fresh eye approach and everybody with a different interest. And it is real. It really is. And one of the best flatteries I can get is when one of my longstanding tourism friends from across the country calls and says, I want to come and see. You've talked about it, I want to come and see. And that's just rewarding to bring them to your hometown, but then to bring them to the area that you're so proud of.
Yeah, and there is a great sense of collegiality as well among people in the industries that are the agritourism industry. And I think that just adds this character that you don't get elsewhere. You mentioned retirement, and I want to pivot to that in a second, but you have this longevity and you have this historical sense of where the Finger Lakes has been. Where does it go in the next 15, 20 years?
I think there's still a lot of capacity. Luckily, we're not the ones who are in an over-tourism situation. But I think that's through good cooperative planning and recognition of what you want to be and sort of roots of who you are, which sounds rather ethereal. But I think that we always need to maintain our sense of place. So there should not be a Disneyland built in our area. It just doesn't fit. So I think as long as developers and builders and townspeople and municipal planners and tourism people can all get together and say, what should our community be? What are our bounds? What are our opportunities? Let's agree upon those. Then I think that process will work. So we won't get too big for our britches. We don't want to be there, but we also need to be contemporary. And that's the other challenge of the industry. So for it to grow and to be contemporary, you have to make sure that the resources and the interest in achieving that goal are aligned.
Yeah, I remember talking to a couple of years ago, one of the head winemakers at a winery that had just won the Governor's Cup, which is the big recognition in the state of New York of the annual wine competition. And I asked him that same question, and he said, thankfully, we're never going to be Napa, right? We just don't produce enough grapes. We don't have that sense of space. And he said, and as to your point of being contemporary, we can be the Loire Valley, where it's small and spectacular, and people come because of experiences. And, I think you and I have talked about one of the challenges I see, and it's something for economic development people to think about is around the country, not just here, but how do you make that vision real? And I use the example, George Clooney hears about the Finger Lakes, he parks his jet at Penn Yan Airport, and then where do he and Julia Roberts and Brad Pitt, where do they stay? Where do they eat? What's compelling to them? And how do you build those resources that make it continuously interesting? So I know as municipal leaders, as a city council member in Canandaigua, I'm constantly asking, what's our vision? Who do we want to be? And I think that is really why your work has been so valuable and you will be so missed, is continuing to ask, where are we going? How do we, continue to remain on people's radar?
I was thinking this morning that one of the phrases that my team may not miss when I'm not here is the "I have an idea" phrase. And sometimes my ideas are generated from a really good shower in the morning, and sometimes they're this blend of where I've recently been and seen and what we want to achieve. So with regard to Canandaigua, and congratulations on the 10 million DRI. That's wonderful news, because I just said, like, having the resources to build what your vision is, I think Canandaigua has a little injection that they can take advantage of. But for years, I cannot tell how often I have presented the opportunity, otherwise known as preached, about the opportunity to use like rooftops and the upper floors of buildings for tourism related enterprises, so the public can get up there, restore that theater that's on that second floor, and then tell the stories about it. And people will use that. They're looking for gathering places. So, good for Canandaigua, and that is the kind of thing that needs to happen. Good for Phelps. They got 4.5 million and they have some restorations to move forward, but that's the exciting opportunities ahead.
Yeah. And for non-New Yorkers, we do this thing, I pejoratively call it the Economic Development Hunger Games.
Yes.
And the state has regional competitions every year. It has is this 8 or 9 years?
Yes, at least.
Something like that. Yeah. And so it's basically economic competition. You put your best foot forward, and the city of Canandaigua was awarded $10 million to invest and spur private investment, municipal investment in continuing the community progress. So, all right, I want to pivot. I know it's fresh. You've had some wonderful articles and news coverage about your pending transition. How did you come to a decision to retire? Transition is a big topic that has come up a lot, whether it's, people were forced out of a job or family situations required change. So it is top of people's mind. How did you make that decision? What was the space that created it? If you'd talk a little bit more about that.
Well, it was not an easy decision because, again, as I said before, I love my job. And when I took this job, I never imagined, I was 28 years old or something, never imagined the profile that the job would become. So recently someone said, what the tourism directors are now or presidents is they have to be the tourism politician. And, at 28, I didn't know that was going to be my job, but that has become my job. So, but my career, my passion has been to grow this organization, and not just the organization, but I only could grow the organization by growing the tourism industry. And seen so many changes. When I first was here, we produced a brochure and an events calendar, and that was our marketing program. And now, of course, there's all of that plus all of the social marketing and things like that. So I feel successful. I've always had good teams around me, and I began to think about what could be next and who could sustain this. And I want to see it sustained. So I felt that we have the right team that can take that vision and move it forward, and it's their time. And so that's where I finally ended up on it, because I said it for 3 times. I love my job. I love the work. I love all the things that I get to do in this. But I think for the reputation and opportunities, it's time for the youngsters to come up and build the next generation.
I just want to recognize you for that self-awareness, but also that means you've built a team, right? That means you've put in the players and you've trained them and given them the resources to succeed. So that is a big reflection. And one of the biggest signs of success for a leader is that the organization continues to grow and evolve after they've retired. And so, kudos to you for having that awareness and that perception.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know why. My husband's already retired, and so I'm looking forward to being on the other side of it. I'll be in Wegmans asking the new director what they're doing about, or having someone say, "Can you take brochures over too?" But it'll be a
Yeah.
good transition for me.
Well, so speaking of that, what's next?
One of the fears, Michael, when you talk about transitions and, your theme of walk on, is people kept saying, well, you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan. And I'm like, oh, I don't have a plan. There's no plan, because I spent my whole life like creating plans and everything. And I sort of want this to be organic. It's like, I have obviously have certain interests and hobbies. I still love to travel, and that will probably never leave me. I have my family, my children. I have a great big family in this area. So just being able to freely go there. And then just the main thing that I tell people, it's not what I didn't want to do anymore. It's not what I wanted to do, but it's what I don't want to do. And I don't want to be obligated to meetings and things like
Yeah.
that. I want to have the freedom to move at my pace. Even if it still is fast, I'll move at
Yeah.
my pace.
Fantastic. And you you mentioned organic. There's another recurring theme is finding space to listen to that inner guide, that voice that says, "Hey, notice me." How do you find that space to, have this organic adoption of what you're going to do next? Where do you create that space to listen to yourself?
I am such a morning person. And I love getting up early, and early can be anything from 3:30 to 5, whatever. And I like that space. My mind is fresh and creative, and that's where sometimes I'll have a new idea or two, or think about what my day is, or think about what my day was. And that's my space time, along with I like to drive, and I like to take pictures, use my phone. And so I use drive time as my thinking time sometimes. And before my father passed away, he liked to ride around, and we'd all take him on rides and everything. And those rides would be all times of the day and night. And I have so many pictures of Canandaigua City Pier in day, in night, in morning, in sunrise, in sunset, etc., because that was a favorite drive through. And I have those in my head. And speaking of driving, the other day I was driving up near Shortsville, and I went on a road I don't think I've ever been on. And I was saying to myself, I don't think I've ever been on this road. This is amazing. I'm seeing a new road. And so I find those two situations to be my most productive for my self time.
I I love it, and I really resonate with the drive time. It drives my wife Audrey bonkers, but I'm like, we're coming home from the Victor or the mall or going home, and I'm like, I don't know what this road is, and my dad always used to say, well, we're not walking, right? So you're in a car, you can always turn around, you can make a left, and so there is some serendipity in that, and I do love that windshield time too, where it's just not too far, but I've had to drive to Providence a couple times this year and 6 hour drive. And it was just, you can listen to music, you can zone out, you can focus on some things you want to grapple with. So I fully support and endorse and agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for other people who are contemplating retirement?
Don't worry if you don't have a plan. Literally, a friend gave me a book and it was like 365 things or 65 things to do and 52 things, I don't know, to do in retirement. And I read it in the first one and I'm like, no, maybe chapter two. I'm not so sure, And then I decided maybe I shouldn't go in order. I should just randomly like pick a chapter. So I randomly picked a chapter and I thought, everything said you had to plan and you had to talk it out and I just closed the book up and said, not me. So my advice is, I guess, although you need to listen to the people that went before you, because
Yeah.
some of them gave me really good advice, like get out of town, especially when you have this profile, let the new person have some space. So literally get out of town, which we're
Yep.
going to do for a little while. It makes me happy to do that. But then I think just feel comfortable with your decision. Don't be afraid to talk it
Yep.
out with some trusted friends, and say, I'm not so sure about this, which I did a few times. And I think one of the hardest things, though, was when you would begin to run into people at a certain point and you're like, when are you going to retire? Was the first question, and it causes self doubt, like, do I look old
What,
today? Do I
you
look
trying
tired
to get rid
today?
of me? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did I do something wrong? What is this question? Well, now I realize the question is of interest, interest in you as a person. It's not like, oh, what you did. And so I think to not take offense by that question and just realize that it's with good interest. And lots of times I would say, well, what do you think? You give me some advice here, and it would just add to the conversation. So
Yeah, fantastic. And we got a couple more minutes here, a couple questions. You've mentioned your team a couple times. You talked about giving space to your successor. How do you prepare a team for new leadership and direction? How do you're taking an off ramp and doing it in such a selfless way. So how do you set them up for success?
I'm trying to make sure that systems are in place, and every time I do something now, I that is so natural to me, I'm trying to either write it down or bring somebody else in and say, hey, you need to know this, and give them and lead some direction. So setting up systems that are in place. And I think it's also supporting them in this transition and talking to them and it's hard to explain, but you said it before, their future success is the best reflection on my career. So any tools I can give them, any comfort I can give them, but I think it's also that they look at new opportunity, and they're core tourism people too, so knowing that I built that core enthusiasm, they'll adapt to just a different way of someone leading.
So, last question. One of the things I normally ask is, gee, what advice do you have for people pursuing passion? And what's interesting is it feels like this passion found you. You didn't go seeking it. But with that caveat, what advice do you have for people that are looking for that thing that's going to motivate them, maybe keep them for 40 years? What do you say?
Gosh, you shouldn't have left the toughest question for last. I really have to think about that. I I guess I my passion is generated by other people. And so I think look to that in different situations, open your mind to that. Understand that your passions may not be perfectly aligned with others, and trying to understand people and where they're coming from would be an advice. And similar to my friends traveling for art and my friends that traveled for bicycling and my friends that did all of this different thing, I think trying things, never be afraid. There's that phrase that says something like dance like no one is watching. And I sort of feel you have to pursue that kind of attitude towards things so that you can see, man, I really like to dance. And so that I guess I don't know if that all makes sense and blends together, but like live it up and give it a try and don't be afraid. Although I'm not going to jump out of any airplanes or anything right away, just so you know.
That's where you draw the limit.
Yes.
That's off the table. Okay.
Yes.
So was that one of the things in the book? Was that a 56 things to do in retirement, jump out of an airplane?
I don't know, because I only read 5, remember?
I love it. Well, Val, I could do this all day. I don't know that my voice can, but
Yes.
I really appreciate you being on. I really appreciate the work you've done for Canandaigua, our region. You'll be sorely missed, but we know you're not going far, and you'll keep an eye on us and kick us in the shins when we're not doing the right thing. So thanks for being on.
Thank you. It's been very kind of people, the comments that they've made, and I appreciate it. So many friendships I've made over the years, and it will reward me into the future as I think about those.
Well, wonderful. This is the Walk On Podcast, people living with passion and purpose, providing a roadmap for your personal journey. Hear their stories. Find your passion. Walk on. Again, Val, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I was hanging